The impossible had just happened. The seemingly impenetrable fortress of liberal media, a monolithic entity that had for decades dictated public discourse and effortlessly crushed dissent, was finally under siege. And its attacker? Not a seasoned general of political warfare, but a rising star whose very existence on their screens was anathema to their carefully curated world. Karoline Leavitt. She was a flash of platinum blonde against a backdrop of staid pronouncements, a sharp, unwavering gaze confronting a sea of performative outrage. She was young, fiercely principled, and armed with a weapon far more potent than any cable news talking point: the truth, backed by the full force of the law. For too long, the cultural landscape had been dominated by entities like The View, an institution that masqueraded as enlightened debate, but often served as a daily firing squad for any voice daring to diverge from its prescribed orthodoxy. Its hosts, emboldened by their ratings and insulated by their perceived righteousness, had become masters of the dismissive laugh, the sarcastic jab, the character assassination disguised as commentary. To be a conservative figure, especially a young woman in the public eye, was to be a perpetual target, a puppet to be ridiculed, a pretty face to be belittled. But Karoline Leavitt was no puppet, and she refused to be silenced. When The View's relentless on-air assaults crossed the line from opinion into outright malicious defamation, she didn't just push back. She launched a counter-offensive that would send shockwaves through an entire industry. With the cold, precise resolve of a general deploying troops, Leavitt filed her first massive lawsuit against The View. It wasn't a warning shot. It was a cannon blast aimed squarely at the heart of their financial and reputational empire. The news hit like a digital earthquake, sending tremors through the polished floors of ABC's corporate offices. Initial reactions from the liberal establishment ranged from bewildered disbelief to outright condescension. How could this political novice, this drama seeker as they would soon brand her, possibly challenge such a deeply entrenched institution? The dazzling, well-lit set of The View. The immediate reaction was one of feigned amusement, a desperate attempt to maintain control of a narrative that was already slipping. Joy Behar, with her signature smirk, visibly trembled as she scoffed on air. "This girl thinks she's who, suing us for telling the truth? What a joke!" Her words were met with the programmed applause of the studio audience, a familiar echo chamber designed to validate every controversial utterance. Whoopi Goldberg, her voice typically a commanding roar, now spoke with a subtly diminished authority, a telltale sign of the cracks appearing beneath the surface. "She's just a drama seeker, but let her try," Goldberg stated, attempting to dismiss the threat even as the words lacked their usual conviction. But the real story wasn't unfolding under the studio lights. It was being written in the anxious whispers of producers and the frantic phone calls echoing through ABC's backstage labyrinth. Here, the laughter had evaporated, replaced by the grim reality of a legal storm brewing. Leavitt's lawsuit was no mere formality. It was a declaration of war with a breathtaking price tag. Its demand for massive compensation was not just a legal threat, but a ticking time bomb, threatening to obliterate the show's financial stability and its very existence. Sponsors, long loyal to The View's reach, began to nervously eye their contracts, fearing the taint of a brand embroiled in a public defamation suit. Each move Leavitt made, each calculated step toward accountability, seemed designed to push her opponents into an inescapable, absolute defense. As the media establishment, accustomed to attacking without consequence, struggled to mount a counter-offensive, Karoline Leavitt, with quiet power, began to lay the groundwork for a precedent that would change, forever, how the media treated young, conservative voices. The first punch had landed, and The View, despite its defiant facade, was already reeling. The Manhattan courtroom was no ordinary legal chamber. It was a modern arena, stripped bare of the familiar glitz of television, yet pulsating with a raw, undeniable tension. Cold fluorescent lights cast an unforgiving glare on polished wooden benches, illuminating every anxious tremor, every defiant set of a jaw. At precisely 9 a.m., the atmosphere, already thick with anticipation, seized completely. Karoline Leavitt strode in, a beacon of cool determination. Her navy suit, sharply tailored, seemed to ripple with purpose. Her eyes, piercing as a blade, swept across the room, meeting the hundreds of expectant faces, reporters scribbling furiously, loyal Leavitt supporters offering silent strength, and even a scattering of the View fans, their faces a mix of curiosity and thinly veiled hostility. This was not just a legal battle, it was a cultural flashpoint, and the whole world, it seemed, was watching. Across from her, huddled tensely on the defendant's row, sat ABC's legal team, a formidable phalanx of high-powered attorneys. Beside them, the very hosts whose words had ignited this inferno, Joy Behar, her signature fiery red hair a stark contrast to her strained composure. And Whoopi Goldberg, usually so confident, now seemed to shrink slightly in her seat. Their faces were a stark tableau of defiance, struggling against a creeping anxiety. Judge Margaret Hensley, a stern, formidable middle-aged woman, took her seat, her gaze steely as she slammed her gavel. The sharp crack echoed through the packed room, demanding order. The legal battle had truly begun. Attorney Michael Caldwell, leading Leavitt's team, rose with a quiet gravitas that belied the power of his words. His voice, though low, was sharp as an arrow, cutting through the stifling atmosphere. "Your Honor," he began, his gaze unwavering, "today we will present evidence that the View, far from merely offering opinion, engaged in a deliberate, malicious campaign to tarnish my client's reputation for their own commercial gain." He gestured to an assistant, and a large courtroom screen flickered to life. The faces of Behar and Goldberg, once so dominant on national television, now appeared as damning evidence. The clip played, and a collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. There was Behar, a mocking smile twisting her features, commenting, "This Leavitt girl, she's probably just a pretty face to spruce up the White House." The studio audience's raucous laughter, once a sign of success, now reverberated through the silent courtroom like a death knell. Caldwell pointed at the screen, his voice rising with controlled intensity. "This isn't an opinion, Your Honor. This is defamation, broadcast nationally to tarnish my client's reputation." He continued, presenting a rapid-fire succession of other. In comments, Goldberg calling Leavitt a shallow political puppet, Anna Navarro mocking her style as glossy veneer with no substance. Each clip, each piece of derision was a hammer blow to the View's credibility. Leavitt sat upright, unflinching, her gaze sweeping across the opposing benches, a silent testament to her resolve. Behar, her face momentarily stripped of its usual sarcasm, responded with a smirk, as if she was still on set rather than in a court of law, desperately clinging to her on-air persona. Goldberg, usually the picture of composure, seemed visibly uneasy, her hands gripping her chair, as Caldwell meticulously listed the damages Leavitt had suffered. Cancelled advertising contracts, withdrawn speaking invitations, the insidious psychological strain from millions of the views and hostile comments. These words didn't just harm her reputation, Caldwell emphasized, his voice resonating with conviction. They caused real, tangible financial damage, and we will prove it. ABC's legal team, led by attorney Evelyn Harper, countered. Harper, with a slick demeanor, argued that the View's comments were merely personal opinions protected by free speech. "Your Honor," she declared, her voice smooth and practiced, "this is a discussion show where hosts express viewpoints. There was no intent to defame, only commentary on a public figure. But Caldwell swiftly retorted, brandishing a statistical chart. Mentions of Leavitt on The View, he highlighted, spiked after each controversial remark, driving a measurable surge in viewership. They intentionally made my client a target to boost ratings, Caldwell declared, the courtroom atmosphere growing tenser with each word. The trial's first true moment of revelation came when Caldwell called the first witness, Sarah Mitchell, a former The View production assistant. Mitchell, visibly trembling but her voice resolute, revealed what producers had encouraged. Hosts were to target Leavitt to attract conservative viewers who would watch to object. They called it a shock strategy, Mitchell confessed, sending a ripple of murmurs through the courtroom. Harper tried to counter, questioning Mitchell's motives, but her testimony had already shaken ABC's carefully constructed argument. Behar, seated among the defendants, began tapping her fingers on the table, a rare, frantic sign of unease as the walls of their comfortable media fortress began to show their first real cracks. Outside the hushed confines of the Manhattan courtroom, the media was, quite literally, ablaze. Fox News reporters, sensing a seismic shift in the cultural war, praised Leavitt as a pioneer against biased media, her image flashing across screens as a symbol of principled defiance. CNN, predictably, rushed to The View's defense, attempting to frame the lawsuit as a desperate attempt to stifle free speech, a dangerous precedent for journalistic integrity. But beneath the ideological fireworks, the undeniable financial consequences were beginning to crystallize chillingly for ABC. The first blow, heavy and undeniable, landed swiftly. A major sponsor, a prominent cosmetics company that had been a steadfast advertising partner for The View for years, announced it was pulling its ads. Their carefully worded statement cited brand risk, a polite corporate euphemism for the toxic reputational fallout accumulating around the show. The news, relayed internally, hit ABC's executives with the force of a physical blow. Shareholders, ever sensitive to the whisper of financial instability, began applying relentless pressure, their voices a rising chorus of fear that mounting legal costs would drag the once unassailable show into a financial abyss. In the courtroom, Karoline Leavitt remained composed, a serene island in a sea of escalating chaos. Though her heart raced with the silent adrenaline of battle, she knew this wasn't just a lawsuit, it was a profound statement. Each accusation from Caldwell, each piece of damning evidence, was a hammer blow not just to The View's legal defense, but to its very credibility. As the trial broke for the day, she stepped into the hallway, facing a forest of thrusting microphones and flashing cameras. "Do you think The View will go bankrupt over this?" one journalist dared to ask, a hint of breathless anticipation in their voice. Leavitt offered a slight, almost imperceptible smile, a flicker of iron will. "I don't want them to go bankrupt," she replied, her voice calm but weighty, echoing with purpose. "I want them to be held accountable. But if that's the consequence, then that's the price of truth." Her words, sharp as a blade, echoed across evening news broadcasts, igniting a fresh wave of controversy and galvanizing her burgeoning base of conservative supporters. Meanwhile, at ABC's headquarters, the atmosphere in The View's production offices was rapidly curdling. An emergency meeting was convened, the faces around the conference table grim. The CFO, pale and strained, delivered a stark warning. "We've lost a major sponsor and more are wavering. If we lose this lawsuit, the compensation costs could destroy the show." A desperate murmur spread among some producers, a quiet suggestion of negotiation, but the idea was swiftly, savagely cut down. Joy Behar, joining via video call from her dressing room, her face contorted with fury, snapped, "Negotiate with... no way. This girl wants to destroy us." Whoopi Goldberg, though quieter, her usual confidence betraying a tremor of unease, concurred. Conceding, in her mind, would be tantamount to surrender, a fatal blow to their legacy. But principle, however fierce, could not stem the bleeding. The financial pressure was creeping in, insidious and relentless. Ad deals that had seemed rock solid were abruptly cancelled. Production budgets were slashed to the bone, forcing difficult, humiliating choices. The vibrant studio, once a bustling hub of creative energy, grew heavy, a palpable tension in the air, like the suffocating calm before a destructive storm. Leavitt, striding confidently amid flashing cameras as she left the courthouse, knew the trial was far from over. With mounting evidence and the surging tide of support from the conservative community, she felt the upper hand. But she also knew the View would not collapse easily. They would counterattack, desperate and cornered, and she would be ready for the next battle. A battle that would shape not only the future of a television show, but her own legacy in the cultural war dividing America. The Manhattan courtroom was steeped in tension, a palpable weight pressing down on everyone present, like a fateful chess game where every move could shift the entire board. Light streamed through the high windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, and more importantly, highlighting Karoline Leavitt's face, her eyes blazing with an unyielding determination. Today was the second hearing, and her legal team, marshaled by the sharp and methodical Michael Caldwell, was ready to land a critical, perhaps even decisive, strike. Across the room, in the defendant's row, sat the View's embattled hosts, Joy Behar, Whoopi Goldberg, Anna Navarro, and Alyssa Farrah Griffin. Their expressions were a volatile mix. Defiance, yes, but undeniably laced with growing unease. The packed courtroom buzzed, reporters scribbling furiously, spectators whispering as if awaiting an explosion that everyone knew was imminent. Judge Margaret Hensley, her gaze as steely as ever, banged her gavel, the sharp crack signaling the start of what promised to be a brutal day. Caldwell stepped forward, a thick stack of documents clutched firmly in his hand. His voice, though low, carried an undeniable authority that commanded the room. "Your Honor," he began, his eyes fixed on the judge, "today we will not only prove that the View defamed my client, but that they acted deliberately, with malice, of forethought to ruin her for commercial gain." He gestured to an assistant, and a new video, crisper and even more damning than the last, appeared on the large courtroom screen. In it, Anna Navarro, with a mocking smile that sent a shiver down. "Spines," said Leavitt. "She's just a glossy puppet, nothing but a pretty face." The studio audience's canned laughter once again filled the courtroom, but this time the air was deathly still, the sound itself a chilling testament to the calculated nature of the attack. Caldwell continued, his voice rising. This wasn't a spontaneous remark. It was part of a carefully planned strategy. He then presented a statistical chart, cold, hard data. Episodes targeting Leavitt consistently saw massive spikes in viewership, a clear, undeniable motive to boost ratings at her expense. The trial's undeniable highlight, the moment that truly sent a ripple of shock through the room, came when Caldwell called his second witness, Emily Carter, a former content coordinator for The View. Carter, visibly nervous, her hands trembling slightly, but with a resolute glint in her eyes, took the stand. Under Caldwell's precise guidance, she began to reveal the insidious truth. She spoke of an internal email from the show's executive producer, an email instructing hosts in no uncertain terms. "Keep targeting Leavitt. She's the perfect bait to draw in conservative viewers." The courtroom buzzed, reporters scribbling frantically, the collective gasp almost audible. Carter continued, her voice gaining strength. They knew the comments were controversial, but they wanted controversy. They wanted it to retain viewers. Her testimony struck like a dagger into ABC's carefully crafted claim that the remarks were merely spontaneous opinions. Behar, seated among the defendants, desperately tried to maintain a defiant expression, but her fingers tapped relentlessly. On the table, a telltale sign of immense stress. Goldberg, usually the picture of composure, bowed her head, her eyes heavy with a visible fatigue. Navarro whispered something to Griffin, but Griffin only shook her head, her face betraying clear, unmasked unease. ABC's attorney, Evelyn Harper, rose, attempting to counter. This witness's testimony lacks context. The email was about content strategy, not defamation. But Caldwell swiftly responded, presenting yet another email where a producer explicitly wrote, "Push harder, make Leavitt look incompetent. Audiences love drama." Judge Hensley narrowed her eyes, jotting something down, a subtle gesture that caused ABC's team to visibly pale. Caldwell then shifted focus, emphasizing the damage Leavitt had suffered. He presented documents proving a multi-million-dollar advertising deal with a prominent fashion brand had been summarily cancelled after The View's relentless attacks. "My client didn't just lose her reputation," Caldwell declared, his voice ringing with conviction. "She lost tangible, multi-million-dollar financial opportunities due to malicious statements broadcast nationally." He demanded an eye-watering $800 million in damages, stressing that the sum reflected not only the scale of the harm, but The View's glaring bad faith. The courtroom fell into a stunned silence, filled only with the scratch of reporters' pens and the heavy breathing of those present. Outside, the media storm intensified. Fox News ran a triumphant headline: "Leavitt lands decisive blow, puts The View on the ropes." CNN fired back, calling the lawsuit an assault on press freedom. But the financial pressure was becoming undeniable. Another major sponsor, a prominent food company, announced a pause in advertising, citing unstable legal circumstances. Internal reports from ABC showed legal costs exceeding tens of millions, a gaping wound in their budget. A major shareholder sent a chilling warning letter to leadership: "If we lose this lawsuit, The View will be an unsalvageable burden." In the courtroom, Leavitt remained calm, though her heart raced. She was not just fighting for herself, but for countless others smeared by the media. As her eyes met Behar's, an invisible spark flashed. Behar, though trying to appear defiant, could no longer hide her anxiety. Caldwell concluded, his statement echoing through the silent room. "We're not just seeking justice for Karoline Leavitt. We're demanding a media system accountable for its words." The decisive blow had been landed. ABC's New York headquarters, usually a vibrant beehive of light and creative energy, now felt like a besieged fortress. Anxious whispers echoed through its gleaming glass walls, replacing the usual hum of industry, creating an atmosphere thick with foreboding. The View, once a flagship of liberal culture, a seemingly indestructible titan of daytime television, now teetered precariously on the edge of collapse, buckling under the relentless, crushing weight of Karoline Leavitt's $800 million lawsuit. The narrative had shifted irrevocably. The show wasn't just facing a legal challenge, it was fighting for its very existence. A leaked internal financial report, circulating like a virulent disease among the terrified staff, exposed a grim reality. Legal costs had shockingly surpassed $20 million, and three major sponsors, once pillars of the show's advertising revenue, had already pulled out, their corporate logos no longer gracing the commercial breaks. Production budgets were slashed to the bone, forcing painful cuts that reverberated through every level of the show's operation. The backstage snack table, once laden with fresh fruit, gourmet coffee and pastries, now held only a few forlorn boxes of stale crackers and instant coffee packets. A stark, symbolic representation of a once opulent empire crumbling from within. The studio atmosphere was heavy, suffocating, as if everyone was bracing for an inevitable storm to sweep it all away. In a closed-door meeting, The View's producers faced an unprecedented crisis. Ellen Whitaker, ABC's executive director sat at the head of the table, her dark, ringed eyes betraying an exhaustion that went beyond mere fatigue. Before her lay a stack of documents in glaring red, a chilling list of remaining sponsors, many, with ominous red question marks next to their names, signaling their imminent departure. "We just lost another ad contract," Whitaker stated, her voice dry, devoid of emotion. "If we don't control this lawsuit, the show won't survive the year." A young producer, voice trembling with barely suppressed panic, suggested the unthinkable, pausing broadcasts to negotiate with Leavitt. The idea was swiftly, brutally shot down. "Pause," a veteran producer snapped, his face contorted in disbelief. "That's surrender, that's admitting defeat." The unraveling wasn't confined to the production team. It seeped into the very soul of The View, its hosts. Joy Behar, with her fiery red hair, clung to her defiant demeanor, but her trademark sarcasm now carried a bitter, desperate edge. In a backstage meeting, she turned her anger on ABC's legal team. "They've let us be backed into a corner. We should have stopped her from the start." Whoopi Goldberg, typically the steady peacemaker, was unusually silent, her gaze distant, lost in a private contemplation of their impending doom. Anna Navarro, unable to restrain herself, continued to launch online attacks against Leavitt, posting, "She wants to destroy us to build her name. Don't let her win." But the post only fueled more controversy, garnering thousands of responses with the hashtag #BoycottTheView, isolating the show further. Alyssa Farah Griffin, with her past ties to the Trump administration, became the group's increasingly fragile weak link. In a heated private argument, she bravely spoke up. "Maybe we need to consider negotiating. This lawsuit isn't just about money, it's destroying our reputation." Navarro turned on her, her voice hissing through gritted teeth. "You're betraying us, Alyssa. Are you on Leavitt's side?" Griffin, her face flushed, retorted, "I'm trying to save the show." The clash fractured the hosts, turning allies into adversaries, making the already suffocating studio atmosphere even more stifling. Griffin began avoiding meetings, a ghost haunting the corridors. Out there, The View's audience remained starkly divided. A small, loyal group organized the Try Support the View campaign, desperately urging a defense of the show as a symbol of free speech. But another growing segment, including many longtime viewers, turned away, feeling the show had irrevocably crossed a line by targeting Leavitt with such malicious intent. A post on X, with over 50,000 likes, read simply, "The View used to be a voice for women. Now they're just bullies." The show's ratings continued their precipitous plummet, the latest episode hitting a decade low. Remaining advertisers, fearing irreversible brand fallout, began sending contract review notices, pushing the show into a perilous red alert status. In an unexpected turn, a major international food conglomerate, a sponsor whose financial weight was considerable, held an emergency meeting with ABC. Their representative, a middle-aged woman with a coldly professional demeanor, declared, "We can't let our brand be tied to a show sued for defamation. Our contract ends immediately." The news hit the production team like a physical punch to the gut. Whitaker, struggling to stay composed, ordered the team to find new sponsors, but a producer responded, his voice weary with resignation. "No one wants to board a sinking ship." The once proud lighting technician whispered to a colleague, "I heard they're about to lay off half the crew." A backstage worker, worried about family bills, quietly started job hunting. Even tapings lost their spark. Lights were dimmed to save power, and high-profile guests declined invitations, citing vague, busy schedules. The View, once a cultural centerpiece, now felt like a forgotten shadow fading into obscurity. Meanwhile, Leavitt continued to solidify her position. Her posts, calm but cutting, drew millions of views. A video filmed in the soft, authoritative light of her White House office showed her saying, "I'm fighting for truth, not hatred. But if the View won't take responsibility, they'll destroy themselves." Her words, meticulously quoted by Fox News and Newsmax, ignited a groundswell of support from the conservative community. A small but growing group of protesters gathered outside ABC's headquarters, hoisting signs reading "Justice for Karoline," ramping up the pressure on the beleaguered show. At ABC, producers faced a harsh, undeniable reality. The View was not just losing money, but its very identity. A veteran producer, his voice heavy with sadness, admitted in a meeting, "We went too far. Maybe Leavitt isn't entirely wrong." His words landed like a slow-burning bomb, silencing the room. But Bahar, via video, interrupted, her voice shrill. With a desperate defiance, "Don't let her manipulate us, we'll fight." Yet her confidence now felt like a brittle facade as the View faced the real, terrifying threat of bankruptcy, its walls closing in. Washington, D.C. was bathed in dawn's pale, ethereal light, the first golden rays gliding over the Capitol dome, illuminating Karoline Leavitt's silhouette as she stepped out of a sleek black car. In a tailored grey suit, she stood before a forest of reporters' microphones, her eyes sharp as steel, embodying the very spirit of the dawn. The $800 million lawsuit against The View had made her the undeniable epicenter of a media storm. Not merely a legal battle, but a scorching spark igniting the cultural war that continued to divide America. Today, her words were brief, surgical, and resonated with a power that far outstripped their brevity. The truth doesn't need protection, it will find its way. Her declaration, like an arrow, pierced through news cycles, sowing both hope among her allies and palpable fear among her adversaries. Meanwhile, The View's New York studio, once vibrant like a Broadway stage, now carried the decay of a forgotten relic. The studio lights flickered weakly, reflecting a show on its last desperate legs. Joy Behar, Whoopi Goldberg, Anna Navarro, and Alyssa Farrah Griffin still appeared on air, but the air between them was heavy, leaden with unspoken animosity and dread. In the latest episode, Behar attempted a joke about frivolous lawsuits, but her smile was forced, met with sparse, almost embarrassed audience applause. Goldberg, her eyes weary, spoke of the power of women's voices, yet her words lacked conviction, hollow echoes in a dying room. Navarro, usually lively and assertive, now stared silently at the table, as if sensing the encroaching shadow of defeat. Griffin, ever the most pensive, seemed to be weighing an escape, a desperate bolt for the exit door. Backstage at The View, chaos reigned supreme. A leaked financial report, the grim reality laid bare, revealed a truly catastrophic situation. The show had lost 70% of its sponsors, with legal costs surging past a staggering $35 million. Production budgets were slashed to the bone, forcing the team to cancel special tapings and cruelly cut staff salaries. A lighting technician, his voice heavy with frustration and fear, confided in a colleague, "They say the studio might shut down if we lose." Rumors of impending mass layoffs spread like wildfire, leaving every staff member consumed by anxiety. The backstage snack table, once abundant with fresh produce and gourmet treats, now held only a few cans of soda and stale bread, a pitiful symbol of a crumbling TV empire. At ABC's headquarters, executives faced a nightmare scenario. Ellen Whitaker, her face stern, received letter after letter from furious shareholders, demanding that she cut losses before it was too late. An emergency meeting erupted into a cacophony of divided opinions. Some, clinging to a desperate hope, pushed to negotiate with Leavitt to save what little remained of the show. Others, swayed by the defiant, unyielding stances of Behar and Navarro, insisted on fighting to the bitter end. Whitaker, her voice low but resolute, delivered the chilling warning. If we lose, not only will The View vanish, ABC's entire reputation will be ruined. Her words rang like a death knell, silencing the room, the terrifying reality settling like a shroud. The lawsuit, though yet to reach a final verdict, had already left an indelible, gaping mark. The View teetered on the brink of bankruptcy, each passing day a fresh cut to its finances and its once unblemished reputation. A leading media analyst predicted in a widely circulated report, "Win or lose, The View may never recover." The big question lingered, a dark cloud over the entertainment world. Would the show collapse entirely, becoming a sad, cautionary chapter in TV history, or would they find a way to fight back at a steep, perhaps unbearable cost? Rumors suggested ABC was desperately considering replacing the hosts, a drastic measure to refresh the show's tainted image. But would that be enough to save it from the abyss? From her office, Karoline Leavitt meticulously tracked every development. Her legal team, led by the indomitable Michael Caldwell, gathered more documents, ready for upcoming hearings, poised to deliver more blows. She knew this lawsuit wasn't just about her. It was about reshaping media accountability itself. One morning, as sunlight filtered through the curtains, she looked in the mirror, seeing a woman transformed by fire, by purpose. "If not me, then who?" she asked herself, her reflection resolute. Then she stepped out, ready to continue the fight, knowing that in the battle for truth, some icons had to fall. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. This story deeply reflects the cultural and media tensions dividing the United States today, where political polarization and the power of media shape how the public perceives truth. Karoline Leavitt, a young conservative icon, confronts The View, a symbol of liberal media, in a defamation lawsuit, highlighting the conflict between free speech and media accountability. Details like internal emails revealing The View's strategy to smear Leavitt for ratings, or the social media divide through hashtags, mirror the reality of how media and the public are drawn into a vortex of controversy for attention. The internal unraveling of The View, with hosts like Joy Behar and Whoopi Goldberg clashing over how to handle the crisis, alongside financial pressure from withdrawing sponsors, serves as a stark reminder of the economic fallout when integrity is compromised. What do you think will be the ultimate legacy of this battle? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more untold stories from the front lines of the culture war.